When Etan Patz disappeared on his way to school, his family were unaware of what had happened to him until after school hours were over and he never returned home. The search for Etan Patz began, and parents around New York became alarmed in such a way that they started changing the way many of them watched over their children. Now, almost 40 decades later, a man has been identified as the perpetrator. Hello, and welcome to Mystery Detective. Please support my channel by subscribing and hitting the bell icon for more crime cases. Etan Khalil Patz was born on October 9, 1972 to Julie and Stanley Patz in Manhattan, New York. He was the middle child. He had an elder sister and a younger brother. At the time of Etan's disappearance, he and his family lived in the Soho neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. Soho is an acronym for South of Houston Street, a name that was first used by renowned developer Chester Rapkin in 1962. Today, South of Houston Street is famous for its boutiques, art galleries, and loft living spaces. Famous celebrities like Dakota Fanning, Alicia Keys, Daniel Craig, John Legend, Justin Timberlake, and Samuel L. Jackson are known to reside or have resided there. The neighborhood might be safe for habitation now, but it wasn't always like that in the 1970s. It was much rougher. The overall appearance of New York City was substantially different back then than it is today. The city had been tainted by a financial crisis from which many believed it would never fully recover. There were high unemployment rates, a significant flight to the suburbs, and attacks on the subway. Times Square was known for its prostitutes and pimps, and Central Park was feared for robbery and rape. Abandoned buildings were occupied by drug dealers and the homeless. Tourists were not left out of attacks and robbery back then. The Council of Public Safety, composed of police, firefighters, and other unions, published a pamphlet titled "Welcome to Fear City" with a large skull on the cover. The pamphlet advised tourists not to go outside after 6 o'clock, not go out of Midtown. They must make a taxi call before leaving their hotels. They should never take a subway ride, and they should leave no belongings in the hotel safe. At the time, when a visitor or tourist come to New York and see such pamphlet, they would undoubtedly turn around and leave. Consider what Etan Patz's neighborhood may have looked like then. Boarded up buildings, shadowy alleys, no security cameras, and no cell phones. The morning of May 25, 1979, which appeared to have been a Friday, the final day of school before the Memorial Day holiday, was a chaotic one in the Patz household. Julie Patz, Etan's mother, who operated a daycare in their home, had her hands full that morning. She had two 2-year-olds to care for, her younger son and another kid who had spent the night. Also, Etan's older sister had resisted getting out of bed. Etan, on the other hand, woke up with a positive energy and was eager to start his day. According to Julie Patz, Etan had been attempting to be more independent, and in the midst of the chaos that morning, he saw an opportunity. He told his mom to allow him walk to school by himself. His mom recalled he pleaded, saying, "It's fine. Mom, I can do it." With some hesitation, Julie accepted. He then crammed his favorite toy cars into his tote bag, which was given to him by a friend's mother. Before leaving home, Etan donned his favorite headgear, an Eastern Airlines cap, after which his mother led him outside. He reportedly left with a $1 note in hand because he intended to get a soda on the way to school. It was the last time Julie, his mother, saw him. When Etan didn't return home that afternoon, she called around and discovered he hadn't made it to his bus or school. Julie claimed that she was shocked when she learned that Etan was missing. "My legs started giving out," she said. Soon, the Patz family house had been transformed into a command post where the press, volunteers, and police investigators had gathered. Etan's photograph was extensively publicized, appearing on television newscasts and the front pages of the city's newspapers. The city was covered in missing posters that featured an image of his hair poking out from under a cap. He was reportedly the first missing kid to appear on a milk container. The way he vanished, the ensuing search, and the anxiety it caused engulfed Lower Manhattan. Residents recalled police officers going from door to door, showing his photos and questioning people about where he could possibly be. Etan's disappearance caused a huge stir even outside his neighborhood. President Ronald Reagan declared May 25, the day of his disappearance, to be National Missing Children's Day, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded in 1984, in part as a result of his disappearance. His case received a lot of attention, but there were no solutions. Numerous theories were put up, and a number of suspects came to light, including Jose Ramos, a man who'd been convicted of abusing children and who the police had been hunting for years. Jose Ramos was romantically involved with a woman who had once been hired to accompany Etan home from school. As time went on, investigation refocused interest. Officials had searched the basement of a Lower Manhattan building for 8 hours in the year 2000. That building was where Ramos had previously resided. Investigators discovered pieces of bones, but it turned out that they belonged to animals. In the year 2012, after authorities discovered that a man by the name of Othniel Miller had laid a concrete floor soon after Etan vanished, they launched a search and dug up his workshop. Othniel Miller was an handyman who reportedly knew Etan Patz. Etan often visited him at his workshop. In fact, the $1 note that Etan carried the morning he was last seen was given to him by Othniel Miller. However, the search, which sparked a fresh round of news media attention, failed to find Etan's remains. But after a few weeks passed, a guy from New Jersey named Josie Lopez got in touch with the authorities and said that he thought his brother-in-law, Pedro Hernandez, might have something to do with Etan Patz's abduction. Back then, on May 25, 1979, Pedro Hernandez was an 18-year-old high school dropout who had recently relocated to Manhattan from Camden, New Jersey. He worked as a stock clerk in a bodega near Etan Patz bus stop on West Broadway and Prince Street. Shortly after Etan vanished, perhaps within days, Pedro Hernandez went back to New Jersey and took a job in a clothing factory there. Not long, he suddenly began telling people that he had killed a child in New York City. At a spiritual retreat, he confided in an elder from his church group and confessed before a prayer group, breaking down in tears. He also confessed to his previous wife before they got married. However, their testimony indicated that the accounts varied. Pedro Hernandez's childhood friend thought he had killed a black child. His former wife, after hearing Muchacho, thought he had killed a teenage boy. Investigators questioned Pedro Hernandez after his brother-in-law dialed 911. The police claimed that after spending many hours with the detectives, Pedro gave in. He claimed that he had asked Etan Patz if he wanted a soda in order to entice him down the bodega's basement. The little boy, who initially intended to buy a soda with his $1 bill, innocently followed him and was immediately attacked. In a segment of the interview that was captured on camera, Pedro Hernandez said to the detectives, "I grabbed him by the neck and I started to choke him." He refrained from claiming that he had killed Etan, explaining that the little boy was still alive when he had placed him in a plastic bag and then placed the bag inside of a box, which he then discarded about a block away. Pedro Hernandez's words have served as the foundation of the prosecution's case against him. Prosecutors have had little to work with in the absence of Etan's remains or any crime scene from which they could gather evidence. In addition to presenting the testimony of the investigators and the people he had confessed to decades before, they also played video recordings of the interviews Pedro Hernandez made to the police shortly before his arrest. The main focus of Pedro Hernandez's defense has been to cast doubt on his credibility. His attorneys contend that 56-year-old Pedro Hernandez has low intelligence as well as a personality condition that impairs his ability to discriminate between truth and fiction. Therefore, they claim, just because he admitted to what he thought he had done does not indicate he actually did it. Becky Hernandez, Pedro Hernandez's youngest child, testified about her father's strange conduct, including his claims of seeing angels and devils, watering a dead tree limb to make it grow, and how she would catch him talking to himself. The defense, however, claimed that the initial suspect, Jose Ramos, the child molester who had been found guilty, had the chance and the incentive to have been accountable for Etan Patz's disappearance. Members of the jury were in doubts after hearing their arguments. There was a deadlocked jury after 18 days of deliberations. In 2015, the judge declared a mistrial. Only one member of the panel who didn't think Pedro Hernandez was guilty held out. However, following a 4-month trial on February 14, 2017, Pedro Hernandez was found guilty of murder and kidnapping. He was then sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Why do you think Pedro Hernandez committed such evil atrocity? Was he truly possessed by a demon? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments.